Hi, I'm Bridger Fates, and welcome to Master Stockman's Sheep Management Videos. We're going to do 8 of these videos, cover some topics that should be interesting to all of you, whether you're managing a small farm flock or whether you've got a large range flock like this that we're out here with today. I think you'll find these videos interesting. We've got a good team. Whit Stewart, Dr. Whit Stewart is our sheep specialist, and he's going to cover a lot of ground in these videos. We've also got myself, Bridger Fates. I'll be covering the economics. Bart and Stan will be hitting on the range management topics, and Hudson Hill will be covering a lot of sheep topics as well as focusing on risk management. So that's the team. We hope to do these videos in a little bit more interactive format instead of just a lecture format. So you're going to see some live action like this, you're going to see some lecture, and then you're going to see some roundtable discussion between all of us. So if that's interesting to you, stick around. We've got some great videos on tap for you. Today in episode 2, Dr. Whit Stewart's going to talk to us about using sheep enterprise budgets to make decisions on our operation.
What are the estimates of productivity you are collecting on your sheep enterprise? Some principles of data collection on the ranch are that they allow us to track progress in certain economically important parameters in our operation. These have to be recorded over multiple years for us to make informed decisions. Year-on-year changes cause us to make reactive decisions rather than strategic ones. We have to make sure that we archive this information in a consistent format across years, but somewhere where it's accessible and easy to use for us. Very rarely will we access data that is hard for us to interpret, especially data we've collected. It's also important to make sure that we collect and analyze data the same way year on year. One example of this is looking at lambing percentage on a per ewe lambing basis versus looking at lambing percentage across the total flock of ewes exposed. These two very subtle differences can oftentimes cause us to interpret information in different ways. Finally, we have to be willing to let the data that we collect and analyze inform our management. For example, if we see docking percentage decrease year on year or a trend of decreasing docking percentages, we have to be willing to look at all aspects of what may be causing those decreased docking percentages, whether it be weather, is it the genetics that we purchased 3 or 4 years prior, is it the nutrition that we implemented in late gestation, or in many cases, is it a difference in guard animal effectiveness or use of guard animals at all? We have to be willing to address multifaceted challenges in what we measure on our enterprise. Sometimes it's important to measure productivity by collecting various time points throughout the production year. Some of these measurements of productivity can help us make decisions to address these concerns. For example, we may often use open ewes or the percentage of dry ewes in our flock to estimate how effective our breeding program may be, or whether we have the presence of infectious agents in our flocks. Lambing percent, or the number of lambs born per ewe exposed, is another index of the reproductive efficiency of our flock. Many extensive flocks in the western U.S. rely on docking percentages, especially range lambing flocks, as an estimate of overall productivity. Weaning percentage is another common measurement of overall productivity and is measured by the number of lambs weaned divided by ewes exposed. The gold standard of ewe productivity is pounds of lamb weaned and marketed divided by ewe exposed and takes into account overall productivity on a per ewe basis. Whatever measurement of productivity we decide to use, it's important that we look at the multifaceted reasons why increases or decreases in each one of these measurements may exist. An excellent study conducted by the American Sheep Industry Association looked at this cost of production as a way of informing our management. They broke this analysis down into different enterprise sizes across the United States, with the various management differences across each region. Enterprise budgets allow us to estimate some of our costs and where we stand in relation to other enterprises of similar size. This cost of production study can be used to help us understand where our variable costs for certain categories may stand in relation to others. For example, in this cost of production study, you can see that hired labor has increased from $16.26 in 2010 to $58.74 in 2018. Wherever these increases or decreases may lie, analyzing these on a multi-year basis allows us to make more informed decisions for our respective enterprise. We need to work through an enterprise budget on our operation to inform our decision making. The following table has been constructed to help understand the importance of productivity and total U costs on our break even. The second column represents weaning weights and can be estimated for each flock to help us understand what our break even costs might be. For example, if our annual U costs are $100 per ewe, and we're annually experiencing approximately a 90% weaning percentage per ewe exposed, and the lambs that we market are 80 pounds, our break even would be $1.39. Anything sold below this price point would not be making us any profit. But what if we were able to increase our weaning percentage 20% to 110%? You can see that our break even cost decreases from $139 per ewe to $114 per ewe. Similarly, in some of our more prolific flocks that may be more intensively managed to achieve 150% lamb crop, or those flocks that have selected for a higher number of lambs weaned and are achieving so, you can see that our break-even cost further decreases to 83 cents per pound. It's important to understand what our costs are, what our productivity is, for us to understand the health of our enterprise.
So a couple of powerful ways to utilize the cost of production data that we just talked about from ASI and the Livestock Marketing Information Center is to develop yourself a spreadsheet that looks like that cost of production data. So this is an example using a 500U operation and entering in the information, in terms of gross receipts, ewe lambs, wether lambs, rams, culls, wool, and then your variable costs, and match these categories with the categories in the cost of production study. So in this example, I'm going to take the Western 2018 average cost of production numbers from that cost of production study and compare them to my own 500U operation. So two things that you can do with this data. Once you've got this spreadsheet built, keeping track of this over time so that you can see this per ewe cost and how it changes over time on your own operation, extremely powerful. Making sure you're moving in the right direction is a great tool and a great way to use this cost of production data and framework. Another thing to do, though, is to look at your own costs of production and compare those against that Western average from 2018. A couple of points before we get to that. One, you can have extra costs. So in my budget of 500 ewes here, I'm feeding my lambs. So if I've got some lamb feeding, that's something that's not in the Western average budget. That's okay. You can keep track of that cost separate. In this example, we have $36. And then there are other categories that might be in that Western 2018 budget that you don't have. Just make sure you keep track of those to look at your overall numbers, but you don't need to have, you're not going to have costs in every category. So in this example with the 500 ewes, if we look at down through these costs, my total cost per ewe is $147.29, and that Western average is $138.81. So my costs are a little over that Western average, and my net return over variable cost is $9,773 for these 500 ewes. So what do you do with these numbers? Well, let's take this example here and look at corn and grain as an expense. So the national average, or that Western average, is $1.51 per ewe, and my average right now is $5.08 per ewe. So I've got to figure out why I'm so much higher than the national average. And it might make complete sense, right? I might need to do that to be able to flush those ewes to get better breed up, or I might just have some time in my winter range scenario where I've got to add some corn to those ewes to keep their body condition score up. So, there might be legitimate reasons to think about why my costs are higher than the average, but it's important to know why they're higher and not just make guesses. The other thing that's interesting, so you know, when you get these numbers and you get this budget and maybe you're looking at this corn and grain and you think to yourself, well, what if I could get my corn costs down closer to that average? What if I could get them down to $2.51 or $2.50? So you enter $2.50 here from that $5 and you get, so now my cost dropped to $144.72 per ewe, and my profit went from that 9,000 up to 11,000. So I see that I made a lot more money by decreasing corn cost. So can you just do it that way? The answer is no. This is really where you need to go to that partial budget process, because every time you change one of these numbers, there are multiple other numbers that need to be changed to really understand the overall impact to you. So if we move this number back to the original 508, you know, we can't just change one number without seeing multiple issues on our operation. So the way to do that would be to go to the partial budget and think through all of those additional costs and changes. So, you know, even though you might be saving some money in terms of reduced costs on your corn, you would have to think through all of the other costs that might increase or changes, right? So if you reduced your corn cost and didn't feed as much corn, maybe you didn't get those ewes flushed before breeding, and you saw a 10% reduction in lamb crop. So you would have 10% fewer lambs to sell, right? Or maybe because you didn't feed corn, you had a reduction in ewe body condition going into lambing, and you again had a reduced lamb crop because of that. So you have to think about all of those consequences of a decision of just trying to save money on corn price. And the way to think about that is to think about all your additional costs that you're going to incur by saving money on corn. Think about any income that you might be giving up by saving money on corn. Think about any additional income that you might incur by saving money on corn, and think about any reduced costs you're going to have. Primarily in this example, it's that saving money on corn. So that's really how you marry those two processes of the partial budget and that enterprise analysis. And it really goes to show how much more powerful each tool can be with having good data. So you have that good data in terms of your enterprise analysis, you're confident on those, you're confident on your cost of production, then you can enter those numbers in this partial budget as you're making decisions. So both of them combined together help you make better decisions on your operation.
You know, it's interesting to me as we sit around and we talk about enterprise budgets and, you know, and do other classes and talk about these economic tools and say, you know, here's the way you figure out whether you're making money or not. It's interesting to me is we always come back to one point that we keep hammering home, and that's how important it is that we've kept good records in order to start doing our enterprise budget.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, it's a good question to ask and something to think about. Certainly, you know, the tools on the website, the Wyoming Ranch Tools website, there are tools that you can use without sort of diving into your records. But even like the, you know, the ewe valuation tool, if you're trying to figure out how much you can afford to pay for a ewe, you know, if you have accurate annual costs of that ewe, makes that tool infinitely more powerful by having those accurate records that you can plug into the tools and make decisions. And, you know, in terms of the records, the tools help the records. So the data from the records help the tools and vice versa. So if you're trying to, you know, collect these records, you get cost of production data and an enterprise budget, then you're trying to make decisions from that. You really need the tools to help you make those decisions moving forward, instead of just using the cost of production data to do that. So.
It's been interesting to me as I've worked with producers how easy it is for them to lose track of things they've spent money on. I remember in 1999 I was working with a family and back then, and they had a $10,000 expense, and we were working several months behind. And even thinking back just 6 months, they had a really hard time remembering what this $10,000 expense was. And then when you get to the point where we're just talking about $1,500 here for panels and $600 here for feed, boy, it's really hard. I think when we start talking about record keeping, it's really important to keep on top of it every month. And more important than even keeping on top of it every month is having a procedure, having a policy, having a way that you're stepping through it as a business, as a family, and keeping track of it. You know, the checkbook does this, we have this card that does this, and just always doing it the same time after time after time.
Yeah, it forces you to be deliberate. I think that's really what the exercise does in theory too, is you're finally looking at things more closely than you would if you weren't doing the exercise at all. But I think the other thing that's important, Hudson and Bridger, is the fact that very rarely do we get a good handle on what our level of production is in our flocks, especially in extensive managed range flocks. We'll use a handful of metrics like docking percentage. If it's shed lamb, we know what our drop or lambing percentage is. And I think it's important that if we don't know what level of production we have, we can't ever attribute a cost to it in an enterprise exercise. And so I think what has been enjoyable but also challenging in working with producers is saying, well, what are we collecting in terms of production potential in our flock? And then once we've identified that, whatever it may be, then you can actually respond through enhanced selection strategies or going after specific traits, or if your market dictates the type of lamb that's being produced. But none of that is done unless you first gauge what your level of production is.
Yeah, I think that's good.
I don't know how many times Bridger's heard me talk in class and say this right here. It's the hardest thing you'll do with these records is being able to take your production records and then bring your economic records and bring them together to be able to put together anything useful. And when we start talking about putting together something useful, we probably start with the unit cost of production, right? And that's what really starts bringing the production records, docking records or whatever, expense records, and bring them together to then start creating something that we can use. So
I guess one other example is we talked about the importance of multi-year data and not year-on-year data, so that we're not just chasing our tail or just solely making reactive decisions. And I think I see this a lot, even just sourcing of winter supplements, is making sure that you have a running tally of what you've been paying for that. Because if you don't, then an abrupt jump looks very, very different year on year. I just think it's important that not only is it archived, but it's a multi-year approach so you can look at those long-term trends as to what's happening.
Yeah, I think that's the real power of these cost of production or enterprise budgets, is looking at that trend analysis and seeing where you are year over year in terms of your costs, and being able to track those, even costs and revenues, be able to track those and see where you can make improvements, where you're trending either up or down. I think that's the real key to cost of production budgets. Certainly, you can also use them for benchmarking, strategies where, looking at using this, the national cost of production data and looking at it, seeing where you're different than the average. You have to be a little cautious with that because, everybody's ranch is going to be a little different. Even your neighbor's ranch is going to be a little different than yours. So, so don't necessarily judge yourself on those raw numbers, but it's a good place, a good starting point. And, if your supplement costs are twice as much as the average, that might be a good thing. It might be a bad thing. Knowing why your supplement costs are twice as much as the average is the important thing. And if they're twice as much the average for a good reason and you're seeing those gains, then that's probably the right decision. If you have no idea why your supplement costs are twice as high as the average, that's where you need to go dive back into those records. And so that's sort of the power of that benchmarking part of these cost of production budgets with sheep producers.
But it's really using a flaw in human nature, right? We want to compare ourselves to others. Mm-hmm. So if we use that and compare ourselves in the right way, we can come up with a good number. And like you guys said, there's two different ways. I think it's also important, Bridger, to talk about when we're when we are going out there having a baseline and benchmarking ourselves against other producers nationally, regionally, that the numbers can change. You know, they can change, but they really do change quite a bit from region to region. So try to compare ourselves to apples. But that trend analysis, when we're only comparing ourselves to ourselves from year to year, you know, 1 year to the next, 5-year averages, that's really where the power starts coming from.
Yeah, I think so. Yep. What else we got?
Barton, on the Ford side, I mean, this might be, you do a lot of monitoring work, you see changes year on year due to precip and other climatic variables. I mean, what have you seen? Why do people want to start monitoring to even see some of their range production and what their production potential is? I mean, what's your thoughts?
Well, the unfortunate part about a lot of what motivates people to start monitoring is usually they find themselves in trouble, either with a public land agency or an environmentalist group. And that's an okay reason to start monitoring, but there are so much better reasons to start monitoring, to really be looking, you know, it's the same as this economic, we want to gauge our progress. So if we're making changes on our range or grazing management, monitoring is really going to be that benchmark that's going to tell us, is what we're doing working? Are we getting more perennial feed, less invasive species, less bare ground? Those kinds of things are going to help us gauge whether or not our management is even working, and are we being effective at it? And if they're not, then that's when we need to start changing things up.
Yeah, and I think consistent with all of this, whether it's monitoring data or production data like you were talking about, or the economic data, you know, we're involved in the sheep industry because we enjoy sheep production. But you know, we get busy, we get in a hurry when we're doing things, and you know, things are hectic when we're working sheep sometimes, and we just forget to sort of, you know, focus on that data part. But you know, collecting the data, whether it's monitoring data, production data, and melding it with that economics data, it's really powerful. You can really move your operation in the right directions with that information, and you just have to sort of force yourself to take that time and collect that data, and you're really going to, you know, for the most part, I think producers really benefit when they do that.
And get younger people involved. I just think you work with young people that are coming back to the ranch. They may have some more motivation to work on some of those more technologically advanced platforms, and they can be an asset in that regard. You can help them get involved back in the operation by doing that. I've seen that a lot.
Yeah. If you can stand young people, I guess.
Well,
it's interesting, though. It's interesting to hear Bridgers say it that way. You got to force yourself, and after 30 years of experience, you'd think we'd come up with a way that we didn't have to force ourselves to do it, right? But it really is. It's one of those things that producers are doing what they love. Producers are doing, you know, and so it's something that a producer just has to decide to embrace. I'm going to keep records. I'm gonna evaluate my records this way, and that's the way it's going to go. So
yeah, I think that's good.
And keeping the data, getting the data collected, you know, it's going to take practice. At first, it's going to be difficult, and it's going to take a long time. But the more you do it, then it starts streamlining out, and it can become almost second nature and become a lot easier, a lot more efficient at it once you've done it a little while.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good. This has been a good conversation, guys. Tune in for more videos. We'd like to thank USDA Risk Management Agency for partially funding these videos. We appreciate their support. We hope that you guys are enjoying these videos. We'd really like it if you would go down below and hit that like button, maybe even subscribe. Certainly in the comments, if you can give us some comments about these tools, about what you've used them on, what you plan on using them on, or if there's other types of these videos that you'd like to see, comment down below and let us know. We'd love to make some more and love to provide some resources for you as sheep producers to make better decisions. And hopefully you enjoyed the videos, and you'll watch the other videos in this series. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button.